Hey everybody, Poohead189 here, and today we're going to be talking about another race from the Forgotten Realms lore, and that is the Deep Gnomes, which is a subrace of the Gnome race, obviously, within the setting. The usual gnome that people often think about are the rock gnomes, and there's also the forest gnomes. Other than that, though, it's just these three subraces, and as I said, today we're going to be talking about the Deep Gnomes. The Deep Gnomes are the closest thing the gnome family has to a black sheep. Many surface dwellers count the Deep Gnomes along with their evil neighbors, the Drow and the Duergar, believing them to be little more than the dark reflections of the friendly rock gnomes with whom they are more familiar. And this is because, well, Deep Gnomes live very far underground. And a lot of races in the Underdark are very malicious and evil. In fact, the Svirfneblin, which is the other name for the Deep Gnome, it's pretty much like saying Drow for Dark Elf. The Svirfneblin are just as good-hearted as their sunnier kin. However, after centuries of dealing with the everyday perils of living in the Underdark, they have become understandably distrustful of all outsiders. Compared to the better-known kin, the Rock Gnomes, the Deep Gnomes are as gray and lifeless as the subterranean caverns in which they choose to make their homes. They keep to themselves out of fear of outsiders, a fear born from numerous poor experiences with such people. To a Deep Gnome, the only people you can trust are other Deep Gnomes from your village, and preferably from your family. All others are best avoided. With strangers, most Deep Gnomes are sullen, reserved, and suspicious, almost to a fault. However, when they are alone with their own kind, they are friendly and respectful to each other. Few people from outside a Svirfneblin community have ever seen this more pleasant side of the Deep Gnomes. For their part, the Deep Gnomes would be horrified to find themselves observed by outsiders, and they find such a person staring at them, or even looking directly at them, quite rude. Deep Gnomes are gnarled and calloused folk, with little fat at all on their weary bodies. Their skin is the color of the rocks among which they live, almost as if they sprang directly from the stone themselves. They have dark gray eyes, tending toward black. Their hair is of a similar color, although it's only seen on the women, as the men are entirely bald and beardless. Deep Gnomes are short-lived for gnomes and reach adulthood at age of 20 years. However, they can live to be around 300 years old, perhaps even longer. Like their lives, Svirfneblin are also short and hard. They stand between 3 and 3.5 feet tall on average. They are thinner than their surface cousins, but they weigh just as much, about 40 to 45 pounds, due to the density of their muscles. They are little more than weary sinews and rock-like bones. Let's talk about their outlook. Dour and cynical, Deep Gnomes are resigned to their lot in life. They spend their days scratching out a living in the subterranean passages near their home. The males mostly mine for precious gems, while the females, who are rarely seen outside their villages, gather food, care for the children, and keep house. Few aspire to do anything other than live out their lives quietly, focusing on doing their jobs the best they can. The Svirfneblin literally have little or no light in their lives. To avoid detection by others in the Underdark, they often refuse to use fire for cooking or warmth whenever possible. Instead, they rely on their dark vision whenever possible, seeing the world only in black and white. The Deep Gnomes live and work in the eternal darkness out of their overwhelming love for gems. Most males spend almost their entire lives trying to chip precious stones out of the earth. They favor rubies most of all. Outsiders often think of Deep Gnomes as irredeemably sullen and suspicious. While there is some basis for this, these are the outward results of survival techniques that these gnomes have had to adopt to endure their harsh and unforgiving environment. Sounds of any kind, especially voices, travel in strange ways in the Underdark, and they have a tendency to attract visitors. In the experience of most Deep Gnomes, such outsiders have only the worst intentions, so when a Svirfneblin encounters a stranger who is actually friendly, they are normally too suspicious to even consider responding in a like manner. He may even eventually warm to his Svirfneblin from another town, but even this can take time. While Deep Gnome adventurers are rare, some Deep Gnomes succumb to gnomish curiosity about the world outside the caverns and mine shafts of their daily lives. This is especially true for those Deep Gnome illusionists who crave to learn more about the nature of their chosen school of magic, but who lack for instruction in the insular village in which they live. Svirfneblin prospectors are also occasionally encountered in the Underdark, far from their homes, questing for promising new veins to mine for their beloved rubies. Now we're going to talk about Deep Gnome characters and their preferred class. Svirfneblin are rarely found outside their society. When this does happen, it's usually a lone prospector, a solitary illusionist, or a group of warriors who have struck out from their town for one reason or another. Typically, Deep Gnomes only leave their home out of a deep and abiding curiosity about the outside world, a burning desire to find more rubies, or the need to find help for dealing with some creature or event the Svirfneblin don't feel they can handle on their own. Svirfneblin adventurers are most commonly fighters, rangers, rogues, or wizards, particularly illusionists. Naturally stealthy, they find that the skills honed in surviving the dangers of the Underdark also serve an adventuring ranger or rogue as well. For prestige classes, they typically go for the Breach Gnomes, which are fighters charged with the defense of cavern homes. In a properly sized tunnel, a Breach Gnome can hold off an invading force almost indefinitely. Now we're going to talk about their society. Deep Gnome communities are subterranean settlements deep beneath the surface of Toril. The central part of the city is usually set in a single large cavern with all sorts of other caverns, rooms, and even buildings attached to the main section by a complex system of narrow corridors and spiraling staircases. When a town is first settled, the top-ranking members of the Svirfneblin clan usually grab the largest stalagmites in the cavern and carve homes out of them. Most people, however, must carve their homes out of the cavern floors or walls. For gnome communities, deep gnome towns are large, usually comprising around 1,000 people. However, these places are normally far more isolated than even the most remote surface gnome town. Most Svirfneblin go their entire lives without even traveling to another deep gnome town, much less actually seeing daylight. Because of the relatively crowded conditions in a deep gnome town, Svirfneblin families typically crowd in a single small room. Children often stay with the family until they are married, at which point they need to either find or make a new home for themselves. Deep gnome children are treasured greatly. It's rare for a family to have more than 6 children in it, and most have less than 4. Deep gnome mothers dote on their children during their childhood. And I know that sounds odd, but these gnomes do live centuries, so. Once the children reach adolescence, they are immediately put to work in apprenticeships for whatever kinds of jobs they expect to have in adulthood. Deep gnomes don't celebrate the transition to adulthood the way their sunlit kin do. Instead, they know they've reached adulthood when they start working at the job of a real adult in earnest. The great majority of male Svirfneblin work in their town's mining operations, extracting precious gems and metals from the earth. Most of the rest spend their time processing and finishing the raw materials the others pull from the earth. By contrast, female Svirfneblin spend their time gathering and preparing food, raising children, and keeping the house. There is a strict division of labor along gender lines, and it's rare to see it crossed. The female gnomes rule in the home and the male outside of it. Most deep gnomes work until they literally drop dead at their jobs. There is no concept of retirement in deep gnome society. Those who are able must pull their own weight as best they can, since no deep gnome wishes to be a burden on his family or community. In keeping with the Svirfneblin concept of equal division of labor, every Svirfneblin town is governed by both a king and a queen, each of whom holds a position for life. The king oversees the community's mining operations and is responsible for managing the place's defense. The queen ensures that the town has an adequate stock of both food and water, and she handles the town's daily affairs. Each is supreme in his or her sphere, though each usually advises the other. The two are rarely married, at least not to each other. When either monarch dies, the other chooses a successor for the deceased monarch by deciding on a contest that can be entered by any eligible member of the community. Usually eligibility is based on gender and status. The winner of the contest becomes the next monarch. So it's pretty much an elective monarchy. The staples of the deep gnome diet are a number of different kinds of fungi found or even farmed in the Underdark, which is one reason why they don't usually need to have fire for food. To this they sometimes add blind fish or occasionally a deep roth, goat, or sheep. Svirfneblin do not often cook their food, as I just said, preferring instead to preserve it by means of salting. The foods are so salty that most outsiders cannot stomach them. I guess salt is a mineral, so that makes sense. Besides water, Svirfneblin drink a salty, intoxicating brew made of fermented fish parts, which is best described as an acquired taste. On special occasions, they drink a wine called Gaugundi, said to contain powdered ruby, among other mysterious ingredients. Svirfneblin have only 2 holidays universally celebrated by all Deep Gnome communities, both in honor of Calarduran, Smooth Hands, their favorite god. The Festival of the Ruby celebrates the mythical time when Calarduran hid rubies and other gems in the earth for the Deep Gnomes to find. It is considered a lucky day for seeking and finding. The Festival of the Star celebrates the continued protection the Deep Brother provides to the Svirfneblin. Deep Gnomes mark the holy day by assembling on the shore of a subterranean lake or pool to watch small patches of a specially bred species of phosphorescent fungi in the cavern roof light up like stars, creating an illusion of the night sky reflecting in the waters below. I suppose that's the closest they ever get to actually seeing the surface. This ceremony reaffirms the Deep Gnomes' ancestral ties with the surface world, and reassures them that they have not been abandoned in the deep places of the world. Let's talk about their language and literacy. Svirfneblin speak Gnome, Undercommon, and whatever tongue is used by those on the surface of their region. That's kind of odd. Those who deal with outsiders often pick up a bit of Common as well. Given the nature of their closest neighbors in the Underdark, it's not uncommon for Deep Gnome linguists to also learn languages like Draconic, Dwarven, Elven, Eluskan, and Terran. All Deep Gnome characters are literate except for the barbarians. Let's talk about their magic and lore. Illusion is the favorite magic of every gnome, but for the Svirfneblin, it's essential to survival. The Deep Gnomes know more than simple invisibility spells. Delving into the cracks of the earth has uncovered many strange creatures and lost lore from ancient empires. The Deep Gnomes treasure the powerful magic items, spellbooks, and other relics of bygone ages, even if they don't completely understand how to use them. Deep Gnomes also have a very strong druidic and shaman tradition, mostly so they can commune with the stone and the earth. One of their favored servants and fighting companions are earth elementals. Now, Deep Gnome magic items. Deep Gnomes favor items that improve their ability to cast illusions and find valuable mineral deposits. They are the sources of many magic items in jewelry form, such as necklaces of fireballs and amulets of natural armor. Their inveterate mining have provided the raw materials needed to create these prized trade goods. The Deep Gnomes are particularly adept at making gems into magic items. Any magic item that consists entirely of precious stones, such as gems of seeing and Ioun stones, can be acquired among the Svirfneblin at 10% less than the normal cost. On special occasions, Deep Gnomes break out the Gaugandy, a prized crimson-colored wine said to grant vision to those who drink it. Few can have more than a few draughts of this heady and expensive stuff without keeling over. Now onto their deities. While the Deep Gnomes of Toril may not particularly be devout as a group, they do have a full pantheon of deities they share with other gnomes. Svirfneblin clerics often move among both minors and mothers, keeping up community spirits. When they think the time is ripe, they declare a holiday festival in honor of whichever god they feel is appropriate. Kalar Duran Smoothhands, the Master of Stone, is the most popular god among the Deep Gnomes, many of whom spend their entire adult lives working in the town's mines. Kalar Duran taught the Svirfneblin to summon and befriend earth elementals. Many Deep Gnome craftsmen work Kalar Duran's star insignia into their jewelry and other handiwork. They are careful not to use this theme with Golden Ring, however reserving that privilege for the god himself. With a golden ring, I apologize. Although he is the patriarch of the gnome pantheon, few Deep Gnomes are drawn to the faith of Garl Glittergold. Garl's bright and sunny nature simply does not seem relevant to most Svirfneblin. Some Svirfneblin even feel that Garl has abandoned them in favor of their more cheery kin. Deep Gnomes feel closer to Segojan Earthcaller, beloved by those Deep Gnomes who keep pets or work with their few domesticated animals. These are usually Svirfneblin females, of course. The rare Deep Gnome Ranger usually finds this god's way with nature to his taste as well. No gnomes really care for Erdlin, but he particularly frightens the Svirfneblin. Tales of Erdlin's habit of attacking especially greedy Deep Gnomes just as they are about to grasp the most valuable gem ever seen are commonly told to young Deep Gnomes to keep them in line. Such parables also illustrate the number of quick and senseless deaths that await Deep Gnomes throughout the Underdark. Only constant vigilance against such threats does any good, and for encouraging them to always be alert, Erdlin has earned the Deep Gnomes' respect. Now we're talking about their relations with other races. Insular and suspicious, Deep Gnomes do not get along well with any other races. If forced to pick with whom they would rather keep company, outside other Deep Gnomes or no one at all, most Deep Gnomes who choose to associate with Forest Gnomes, and then Rock Gnomes. Beyond that, they might not mind Gold Dwarves or Shield Dwarves, or the occasional Elf. Indeed, there is a time in the Dritz novels when Blengdenstone, I believe the town is called, was sacked by Dark Elves, and the Deep Gnomes of the city had to make their way to the surface, and they began an alliance with the Shield Dwarves of Clan Battlehammer. Svirfneblin do not have much feeling about any other standard character races other than a general aversion to all of them. However, they do have a deep and abiding hatred for Drow and Duergar. These two races with whom the Deep Gnomes share the Underdark have long been a thorn in the side of the people who would much rather just be left alone. Also, the evil tendencies of these races have led many surface dwellers to think that all who live in the Underdark are unrepentantly evil, a prejudice that frequently causes the Deep Gnomes grief when they first encounter an ignorant intruder from the surface. However, there is some exceptions with Duergar, but only because Duergar are generally either neutral or evil, but not always purely evil, and they are big traders. So sometimes, if a Deep Gnome is feeling very entrepreneurial, they might trade with a Duergar, but usually they hate each other. Now let's talk about Deep Gnome equipment. Svirfneblin decorate their possessions with gems they've mined themselves, and smiths and jewelers are among the best in the Underdark. The Deep Gnomes have also turned mushroom farming into a science. Through arcane experimentation and careful crossbreeding, they've grown a species of mushrooms that provide leathery fabric, woody stems, and any number of other useful materials. Arms and armor. In battle, most Vertebrin favor light picks of the sort they carry with them constantly and use in their daily work in the mines. Female Deep Gnomes use hoes or other domestic implements for defense in an emergency. For ranged attacks, they prefer regular darts as well as special kinds of described below. Some also carry light crossbows for such work. Zervtablin manufacture and use a number of specialized weapons particular to their race, including acid darts, crystal caltrops, stun darts, and flash grenades. The latter are particularly effective against the Deep Gnomes' drow enemies. Now, finally, on to their animals and pets. Deep Gnomes often keep a herd of deep roth, goats, or sheep somewhere on the edge of their town. They tend them cautiously, always taking care to make sure the animals remain as silent as possible. The Zverfnablin do not want their animals to attract unwanted visitors. As for pets, most Deep Gnomes don't keep them. There are some who have a few small blind fish in a glass bowl. Others might actually have moles, shrews, bats, dire rats, or cavakins as animal friends, although these live nearby the gnome's home, not actually in it. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much. Please like or subscribe or comment if you have any questions or concerns or just want to have a discussion. Alright, thanks guys.